Hi, I'm Mitch, and welcome to the Restoration Road, where my guest today is Missy O'Connor. Missy was vulnerable enough to share her story on about a 2 or 3 minute video at County Line Church of God one day when I was sitting near the front row and was amazed. I was amazed that one person could endure what she endured and be used by God to bring His restoration to others. You will not want to miss the vulnerable, transparent, and authentic story of Missy O'Connor. Missy, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
You have an amazing story of restoration. I saw a small, short video clip of it in church one day, and I thought, we have to have her on Restoration Road. And so I texted Stewie, and he let me reach out to you. Can you talk about growing up and what that was like for you?
Growing up, I was raised Catholic, and my father was in the military. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and we also attended a private Catholic school, so there was a lot of church 3 days a week through the school, every Sunday. And I always rebelled against it from a very young age because my mom had always spoke of God as a loving being. But at school and at church, it was a lot of fear. We weren't really taught to have a relationship with Christ. It was follow the 10 Commandments, do this, and every time you sin, regardless of how small, you would repent. So from a very young age, I kind of rebutted against it. But it was very hard for me to live. I should say my whole life, even at a young age, was afraid to live life. I was afraid of sinning. I was afraid of making a mistake. I was afraid of disappointing God and then suffering punishment for it later. And
then your relationship with your dad was probably added to the confusion.
It was definitely a estranged relationship with him. When I was 7 years old, my father had sat us all down. I have 3 siblings, and he had sat us on the sofa. Came home. He also worked second shift on top of being in the military, so he wasn't home a lot anyway. But he had sat us all down and had told us all at the same time, including my mother, that he had fell in love with another woman. And after 7 years of marriage, or 17 years of marriage, he couldn't be with us anymore. And he really didn't let us ask him questions. He just told us that he couldn't be with us, and he walked out the door. And I remember following him out the door, or, watching him, and he got in his pickup truck, and the woman he was leaving us for was in the truck at the time. So it was a lot of confusion, and I carried a lot of guilt with it too, because, here's a single mom raising 4 children with no job, and she was obviously in shock, but it was cries and begging God, what are we going to do, and how am I going to feed my children? And you take all that in as a child, and you're helpless, and it's very hard.
And I imagine abandonment is sneaking in.
Abandonment. And that abandonment is something that, because of that, I carried through up into adulthood. There were some other things too that happened, but I felt like God had abandoned me as a child. I felt that my father had abandoned us all as a child. And so abandonment is something that you carry with you for a very long time, and it's a very long process to work through.
And do you see your dad from time to time after he left, or?
We were supposed to go with him every other weekend, which he didn't usually pick us up because he felt like girls, we didn't really have that much in common. And my dad was very selfish at the time, and it was about what he wanted to do. And so after he had gotten remarried, he ended up marrying the woman that he had an affair with. And we were with her on the visits that he did pick us up for.
And then you're about 8 years old when your mom starts dating again?
One thing that I remember as a child always praying for was to have a great dad. And, since my father and I have made amends and we have a great relationship, but at the time it wasn't. And my dad was never there for events or school functions or parent-teacher conferences. And so every night when I would go to bed, would pray for God to bring me, a father. And my mom ended up, she worked out at the school and had met a teacher there. And it was their very first date. he said, do you and your sister want to go? And he took us out to the movies, and when we didn't have any money. And so at the time, movies were a very big deal and very expensive. So he took us out to dinner and to the movies. And I was like, he's going to be my dad. So
how did that unfold?
Well, so they ended up dating for a couple years before they got married.
Wow.
So I believe I was almost about a year and a half. I was 9 when they got married. And he's been amazing ever since. I mean, he is our dad. I have 2 dads, but I mean, he raised us and he was there for us, and he instilled morals and values and beliefs. And I remember lots of times my mom getting jealous because she would say, why do you always tell him everything? But we just had a bond,
that's really cool.
right away.
That's really cool.
So, yeah, definitely blessed.
Now, your dad got remarried, and did he have a change of heart, or is he still kind of the tough and rough?
Yeah, not a change of heart at this point. It was still more about what he wanted to do when he wanted to do it. And he was in the military and worked second shift. And so we were left with our stepmom every visit. And she, at first, you think, oh, you broke our home. You're the reason our home is broken. But then once my mom remarried and we had such an amazing new dad, I started to view her in a different light. I was like, oh, because of you, I have a dad, because of the decisions you made. And then I started praying to God and making it more of a blessing than a curse for my life. And so once I processed that great things were coming from it, then I was open to build a relationship with her, and we became very close.
Would it be mild to say your dad was critical of you?
He was very critical. I was 10 or 11, and he would say, oh, you gained a couple pounds, or, ooh, those pants look tight on you. And then, then that further stemmed into eating disorders by the time I was a teenager.
Really? How long did you endure that?
The eating disorders, I started when I was 16, which is about the time I started dating. And so 16 until I have been in recovery 2 years. And so up until a year before. So just until the last 3 years.
Oh, so it's lasted a long time. Restricting, binging, purging, all the above?
Both, yeah, all of it. I would say anorexia to the point of going days without eating, but then bulimia. So when I did eat, I would purge or take laxatives.
Do you remember August 13th, 1999?
So August 13th of 99, and by this time I'm 20 years old, and so my siblings and I we have a very good relationship with our stepmom and her children. And she worked in Fort Wayne, and she was on her way home from work, and an elderly couple, the husband was driving, and he had a heart attack behind the wheel. And so as she was driving home from work, there was a head-on collision, and she was killed on impact.
You got to think, it just seems to me at this point, I guess I want to ask, are you confused? Are you angry with God? What's all going on inside of you after just all these things?
I never really learned how to have a relationship with Christ. I just learned to pray to him and ask for things, I guess.
Sure.
And so when I wasn't getting what I was asking for, then it was like, this just isn't working for me. And so then I started branching off and seeking, I guess, my own God, as you will, and researching religions and cultures. And
so you were seeking.
I was seeking. I just didn't know what I was seeking.
Sure. So that's what you mean by my life was a paradigm of mixed religions and cultures. You were just looking for whatever's going to fill that void.
Peace.
Okay, September 2000, you meet a guy.
I meet a guy in September of 2000. He had worked with my brother. And by this time, I was very insecure, and I started dating when I was 16. So intimacy was involved right away. And within 3 months of meeting him, I was pregnant. And so my family and his family did not want a grandchild out of wedlock. And so although they didn't say, you have to get married, the pressure still existed to get
heavily
married.
Implied.
Yes. So we were together 3 months. I was pregnant, and 6 months later, we were married.
And you're preparing to walk down the aisle.
So I'm preparing to walk down the aisle. I am pregnant, and my family's there. His family is there. And we got married at his mom's house. So I was up in a bedroom upstairs getting dressed, and his cell phone had went off. And I thought, well, I better check it. Somebody's coming, for the wedding, or they're lost. And it was a message from his ex-wife, of a very detailed message of some sexual relationships the night before we got married. And so there was this fear. Obviously, I'm pregnant, and what am I going to do? And I don't want to raise a baby on my own. And I saw my mom as a single mom, and it's not what I wanted for my life.
Did you finally confront him about it?
Oh, I did confront him about it after we were married.
How do you respond? Did he deny it? Did he?
He didn't deny it.
Okay.
He said that it had happened and that he felt like we weren't married yet. And so I just thought, you know what? It is what it is. Now we're married and we're moving forward.
You say that exactly 2 years and 10 minutes after the death of your stepmother, your daughter was born.
Exactly.
And how did that change your life?
Amazingly, all I ever wanted to be was a mother. I had a great mother, and I just wanted to be a nurturer and a protector. And so it was one of those things where I was like, I'm going to be a mom. And so she came early. She was 6 weeks early. And it was crazy because when we got the birth certificate and compared it to the death certificate, it was 2 years and exactly 10 minutes from the day that my stepmom had passed. And so I felt like, to me, it just shows there's two sides of life. There's death and there's that anguish, but then there's also life.
Yeah.
And I feel like God had blessed me.
Things are going well until you stumble on a box in a closet, I believe.
Yes. So I have my daughter, and I'm married, and I feel like my life is complete. That's what I wanted to be, was a wife and a mother. And I was cleaning out a closet in our bedroom, and I had found a box. I call it Pandora's box because I had opened it, and it was full of pornographic content and pictures, and he was in the pictures.
Your husband?
Mm-hmm. Was in the pictures. And so then I had realized that this was going on behind my back, and that the commitment wasn't there.
How did that affect your feeling towards God or your perspective?
I don't think necessarily I took that out on God. I took it as I'm a failure, and I'm failing as a wife, and what am I doing that my husband doesn't love me and can't stay committed? And it feeds right into the eating disorders and the low self-esteem. And so to me, I didn't blame that on God. I took it wholeheartedly on myself.
So you blamed yourself?
I blamed myself.
Man, depression?
Off and on. Mm-hmm.
Off and on. And I think it's a few months later after you find Pandora's box that you get a call.
So what happened was once I found the box, I addressed it right away, and I was like, what am I doing? What can I do? And it wasn't, this is who I am, take it or leave it. It was, I'm going to change, and I'm going to be the wife that you want. And whatever you want me to do, I'm doing it. And so I said, you know what? I will take pictures with you as long as it's between us. We're married. I will do whatever you want. So I did. And then it was about 2 months later, maybe 3, and my cell phone rings and I answer it. And there's a gentleman on the other line, and he asks, he's like, is this Missy? And I said, yeah. And he said, hey, I was wondering if you and your husband could take more pictures for me. And I said, what are you talking about? And I had no idea.
Right.
And my husband had taken the pictures that we had taken and sold them to the website that he had been working for behind my back. And I was crushed.
You have to feel probably the ultimate feeling of betrayal you've ever experienced.
Yes.
What happens next? Like, how do you work through that?
To me, it was a sign that no matter what I do, these things probably are not going to change unless he gets help.
Did he?
No. And so what happened was, then I thought, well, I need to get out of this marriage. It's just not for me. And then I was pregnant with our second child.
That's your son who was born November 12th,
November
2001?
12th. Mm-hmm.
So are you looking at it as I'll stay in the marriage because?
Yes.
Okay, I have a son.
So from the weight gain of being pregnant, and I did do okay with the eating disorders through the pregnancy. I mean, that gave me enough encouragement to stop it through then, but it was after the pregnancy that it would get really bad again. And I just thought, he had said, you know what, I want to save our marriage. We're going to do this. We're going to have 2 kids. And I was like, okay. So it wasn't, once I was having another baby, I was not leaving.
But at 6 weeks old, how do you know that there's something that needs to be addressed with your son?
So our son was born, and he didn't look quite right when he was born. And we just assumed, oh, he's pale because it's jaundice. Well, by the time it was just before he was 6 weeks old, and he was projectiling, like vomiting everything he ate.
Oh, my.
He wasn't gaining weight. He was so pale that you could see the veins like in his skin. And so we had taken him to several doctors. And then Dr. Smith at the time, who was from Riley, had came down to do a checkup on him. And he was diagnosed with pyloric stenosis.
What's that?
It's the valve from his stomach to his small intestine had actually grown shut in the womb. And so as he was eating, his body was absorbing some food, but most of it was coming back out. So they said, we're sending him in right now. He's going in for emergency surgery. So I said, okay, we're going to do this. So he was 6 weeks old. They take the baby away. He goes in for surgery. And the nurse before the surgery had said, this is going to be a 15-minute, 30-minute procedure. We'll go right in there. We'll fix it. We'll let you know. So 3 hours goes by, and there's no surgeon. There's no nurse. And there was another couple sitting right beside us. And we got to talking, and their son was 2. It was his 2nd birthday. And their son was having the same surgery that our son was having. It was for the pyloric stenosis. And so we're sitting there waiting, and then a doctor and a nurse came out, and they go over to this other family, and they said, we're sorry to inform you, but your son just passed away.
Oh, my goodness.
So their son had died on his 2nd birthday, having the same surgery that our son was having.
You got to be in a panic almost.
And I just fell to my knees, and I bawled, and I prayed, and it was the first time that I can remember praying in years. And I was like, dear God, do not, take my son. When they had opened up my son to do the pyloric stenosis surgery, all of his organs were malrotated. And so when they opened him up, they came out. So they ended up removing a large portion of his intestines, large intestines, and then they mesh netted his organs, except for the heart, into place. And so it ended up being quite more extensive than what it was. But he went to the NICU, and within a few days, he was home.
Did okay?
He did.
He's doing okay?
He's doing wonderful. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome.
Freshman in high school. So.
That is just awesome.
Yep.
January 22nd, 2007, you have a 3rd child, another boy.
We have a 3rd child. Yep. And at this, over the course of the couple years, things are going well in our marriage. I feel like it couldn't be going any better. We're both working, and we're raising our children. And
it's kind of like all the bad stuff's in the past.
All the past is in the past. It hasn't been, nothing has been brought up. We're just moving forward.
And you get a knock on the door.
I get a knock on the door. And it's the police department. And they ask if my husband is home. And as I let them in and he's walking around the corner, they arrest him in front of our children. And it was related to selling precursors to meth. And I was upstairs with the kids. Actually, the neighbor had came over and taken the kids for me. And then I was sitting in the stairs going down the basement. That's where they were talking to him and interviewing him at. And I had overheard him telling the police that he was using as well.
So what happens?
So they arrest him, and his mom comes over, and I remember looking at her, and she said, "You're going to leave my son." And I said, "Yep." That was just the final straw.
Sure.
I couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah. Well, in May 2011, you met your oldest brother, and
Yes.
while you were there, you were reintroduced to a friend of the family you hadn't seen in 15 years?
Yep. And so I'm divorced now, and obviously dating comes along with the divorce process. And I'm reintroduced to a friend of the family. He was still married. My brother had said they had a very rocky marriage, and they were in the process of a divorce, from what I knew. He made me feel absolutely important and amazing, and that everything about me was perfect. So we stepped out to get drinks one night. A few months had passed, and we ended up sleeping together, and then still hadn't filed for divorce. I had ended up going on a vacation to spend some time with my dad in Florida for a couple weeks. And while I was there, he had called and said, "I filed for divorce. I want you to come home, and I want us to have an actual relationship."
And you're thinking, this is it?
This is it. So I come off the plane. He meets me at the airport together ever since at this time.
At that time.
Yeah.
But you found out he also had an addictive personality?
Very addictive personality, and very verbally and emotionally abusive.
And he's addicted to drugs and alcohol?
Mm-hmm.
And so how long does this last?
It lasted for 5 years, and I can't place the blame on him as far as the red flags were there before. I saw the drinking. I saw the drug use. It was, I'm going to put my blinders on and he can change.
How in the world did you come to the point to surrender your life at Christ? How did you enter a church door? How did God orchestrate all of that amidst this?
So 3 years into the marriage, I was completely broken and completely suicidal. And I thought, I need hope. And there is patterns in my life that are repeating themselves, and I don't know how to get them to stop. I have a friend at work that said, you know, I attend County Line Church at Auburn, and you live close to there. If you ever want to go, meet me there sometime, him and his wife and his kids. And I thought, I don't know. And then a mother of my daughter's friend lived down the road. And she said, you know what, I'm going to call you when we go to church and you're going to meet us there. So she called, and the kids and I went, and she sat with us through the first service.
And what did you think as the Bible was taught? Did you feel like he was speaking to you, or was there an immediate connection, or were you still a little leery?
Well, by this point, I had never really opened the Bible, like to read it and to apply it to my life. I thought, oh, this is just a book that, you know, gives you direction, but it's not the word.
Mm-hmm.
And so your brother was speaking, and it was on about, you know, finding hope. And it was about everybody's life can change, and you just have to accept Christ. And I thought, I don't understand the accepting Christ part, but I know that I am broken and that I need help.
And did that happen soon after that you?
So I thought, he had done a prayer at the end of church, and he said, if you have never surrendered your life to Christ, you know, even if you don't know for sure exactly why you're doing it, but you feel compelled to do it, you know, raise your hand and do it with us. And I remember doing that prayer. Wow. And so I thought, gosh, this peace feels kind of good, you know?
Yeah. That peace you were looking for.
Yeah, it was like, I think this is what I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. And so we kept going back, and we kept attending. And then it started coming to baptism. And then it was August, and August is a big month for me. That was my stepmother's passing and my daughter's birth. And I thought, oh, it's in August. This is a sign. And so my 3 kids and I got baptized together at County Line Church.
That is just beautiful. How are you feeling today?
Today I feel awesome. I think what really helped me is I also got into counseling with a Christian counselor. And then through County Line is where I was introduced to the program, Celebrate Recovery. And I thought, gosh, this might be the place that I need to go. And so between counseling for 2 years, Celebrate Recovery 2 years, it was a lot of living through regrets and getting through it and stop passing the blame. Things that happened to you as a child is not your fault.
Right.
And so it was getting rid of the guilt. But then as you age and you become an adult, there's a lot of no boundary setting that is your fault. And we really have to take ownership for our part. And so it has been 2 years of figuring out what my part is, and 2 years of figuring out what isn't my part. And, you know, and so today I feel blessed and at peace, and that God is doing amazing, amazing things in my life.
And it looks like you're studying the Bible for yourself.
I study the Bible. Google comes in handy because I didn't even know where to find anything. And so what it started as, you know, I'm fearful today, or I feel guilt today. And I would Google, what does the Bible say about fear?
Ooh.
What does the Bible say about guilt? And then it would pull up the passages and where you could find it. And then I would screenshot them, and then I would read them throughout the whole day.
Oh, wow. That is awesome.
So that was how I got introduced to the Bible.
What happened to your relationship with your dad?
So throughout the years, our relationship had been kind of come and go. I spent a lot of years trying to make him want to be in my life, and it just never seemed to work. And so my prayer was, you know what, God, if you ever give me the opportunity, the one thing I want is amends with my father. And so going through the divorce, I thought, I really need a break and I need the ocean. My dad lives in Florida. And so I randomly called him and said, you know, hey, can I come for 4 days for a long weekend, bring a couple of my girlfriends? And he said, sure. So while I was there, we would get up early, my dad and I, at 6:30 when everyone else was sleeping, and we would go outside on the patio and we would talk. And throughout the talk, he started talking about living with guilt and not being a good father and not being there for us. And then I had made a video for County Line talking about my Celebrate Recovery journey, and I had played it for him. And I was scared to death because it, talked about our problems and some difficulties growing up. Yeah. And so over the course of 4 days, we talked and we made amends, and he came to my sister's in Tennessee this past for Thanksgiving, and it was the first time he drove and was at a Thanksgiving in more years than I can remember.
Isn't it cool how the peace of God that comes into our lives leads to reconciliation in his peace also in our relationships?
Absolutely. And one of the most amazing things for me to realize is that it's in God's timing. So all those years that I spent trying to force something that he wasn't ready for yet, and to now think, here I am almost 39 years old, and it's like we picked up where we left off,
Missy, thank you so much for sharing your amazing story. God uses the Word of God, the people of God, and the Spirit of God to restore us, and it's so evident how all three of those have been evident in your life. You're amazing, and God's going to use you mightily to draw others to himself.
Thank you.
Our prayer for you is that wherever you are, that you would not get cleaned up to come to Christ, but that you would come to Christ to get cleaned up. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. I will give you restoration. I will make you new again." He said, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." My yoke is easy meant that the entrance into discipleship with him is easy. He's paid it all, which is what my burden is light means. He's paid for everything, all of our sin, and the ground is level at the foot of the cross. So come to him. Learn from him. Be discipled by him and his people. Get in a relationship at a local church and grow like Missy did, and experience the love of Christ and the wisdom of Christ and his power to make you new again. And then he will use you for your ultimate design, and that is to be used by him to bring his restoration to others.
One of my favorite books. I would implore you to get this and check it out. Street Smart. Can't go wrong. Something you really need, especially if you're going to be hanging around my area. Street Smarts is what it is.